Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining this discussion focused on the last chapter of the book, Jesus in Our Days. If we keep moving, and I'm going to make this larger so you can see. As you can see here, the psychological series, which was written by spiritual author Joanna de Angelis, is very powerful and impactful, and I've been honored to be here and present some of the main ideas found in the book. And the intent of this series of live talks was really to discuss those insightful messages that were contained in this very first book of the psychological series by Joanna de Angelis in collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco. So we have reviewed a chapter on a weekly basis, and each chapter, funny enough, it's about 3 pages long, and they contain, as you can see on the screen, different perspective about Jesus, how Jesus dealt with all of those areas. But what is so interesting here is that as we delve into each of the teachings, each of the chapters, we were taken by, first and foremost, how timely they are to us today, and also how Joanna de Angelis presented what she calls an uncrucified Jesus, a man, a role model, somebody who is really our therapist. So I invite you to take the time to read the book. I would like to see you inviting Jesus in your life, just like I have been able to do. And like me, he will help us really confront and address so many challenging situations as we get to them. So I am just going to say that we spent 5 months together looking into the past 20 chapters, and here we go to the last one, which is, as we see here, Jesus and enemies. I hope you are able to kind of second guess what are those enemies. Well, let's move on. Well, very interesting here because Joanna de Angelis starts the last chapter with a very bold statement. She says, while technological progress has provided people with comfort, so we have technological progress that provides comfort, it relentlessly equalizes people at the same level. So, access to be able to do things. So, we're all the same. And she says something very bold, producing a sort of dehumanizing equality that consumerism has established as an important social achievement. Oh, wow. So let's move on. We're going to spend the next few minutes together just to really understanding what did she mean by that, right? While technology progress has provided people with comfort, it relentlessly equalizes people at the same level, producing a sort of dehumanizing equality that consumerism has established as an important social achievement. And I have to say, as I read it, I got very interested in understanding Joanna de Angelis. What are you thinking? What are you talking about? And by the way, she brings that same issue in a different book, a book that was recently published. I believe a couple of years ago, Empty Lives, that I welcome all of you to also read it. But let's just break down what she's talking about so that we can all understand. First and foremost, what do we understand when we talk about technological progress? Well, technology and its advances, first, to me, it has provided me and you and all of us with comfort. I no longer have, let's say, to wash clothes by hand. I may do that, but I don't have to. I don't have to walk miles and miles. I can take the bus or the train or the car. I can talk to you right now using a technology, a platform that helps us get connected without necessarily having to be in the same room. So, some of the things that the technology and its advances provided us include communication platforms, as I mentioned, through cell phone was an incredible invention, right? Personal computing, which is I'm dating myself dramatically here, but my first I went to school and we did not have any computers. I went to study and get into a profession that today without computer doesn't exist, which at the time was architecture, right? It was completely drawn by hand. So personal computer changing the labor force in general, healthcare and robots, right? The Internet of Things, from smart cars to smart houses to smart cities, we're all interconnected. And I can even think if I just go around just looking for some incredible technological advances that are very very close to us now includes the genome project, right? How can we understand our genome and edit it? Or how can I map my brain? Or, speaking of brain, the whole concept of artificial intelligence. Oh, the list goes on and on and on. But the conclusion as we think about technological advances is that, Joanna, yes, they give us comfort because we can do more in less time, incredibly more in less time. And we, as a result, have more time to do more things. And yes, it's an equalizer. I don't have maybe to read different languages. I can just translate them with the push of a button, and here I am. I'm accessing information. I can watch, I don't know, movies in the comfort of my home, so on and so forth. And I pause here because it's quite interesting. Why is it that Joanna is in her last chapter of her first book, right, is bringing this concept of dehumanizing equality. It was very striking to me what she says here. Why is it? And to me, I believe it's an almost unintended negative consequence of technological advances. Or was it? So let's dive into a little bit further because according to Joanna, and right, we in the West, where I am, we are immersed in a capitalist society, and as such, we are born, we are educated, we are prepared, right, and we are measured. Our success is largely measured by our ability to produce. And produce what? Well, we can produce stuff, but we can also produce an idea, innovations, intellectual property, or an image. In any ways, there's a strong correlation today with technological advances, the ability to produce more, and the push to consume those largely available, newly produced items, right? So we hear, for example, um, the future, specifically the future of healthcare, the future of retail. I don't know. I have read many, many articles about throughout the past 20 years. And if you start to look at it, how are all those different areas changing through technology? And it is really fascinating to me, especially in the so-called pandemic years, and I'm referring to 2020 to 2022. Mobile technology has pushed us and allowed us to obtain the services and products we needed, right? So we we needed to go to the doctor, but we are really at home because of a pandemic, and we're unable to meet people. So that little thing, that mobile device, will allow me to buy what I need without having to visit a store, or will allow me to now have largely most of doctor visits from the comfort of a home again. And as consumers of those products and services, we are really facing this new paradigm, right? Because we are actually our appetites are whetted every day. Just we are encouraged to acquire or to follow things, the stories from around the globe. And it's just so easy. And if you even talk about the acquisition of products, prices are available and I don't have to wait much time, right? And they're delivered most likely in our footsteps in a couple of hours. So the influence of technology in consumer behavior, my behavior, your behavior, is impossible to ignore. And if you think about it, right, now we as consumers are able to access information in an unlimited manner, and we can demand more because we know more. And the other aspect of it, that social media as a platform has given us consumers this larger voice, right? This channels to communicate, and not only that, but brands will communicate to us, and we can share our opinion to each other through a social media platform. And this is an interesting ecosystem that is created. So, yeah, we are more connected, and very interesting. There is a study, it's a study by the Center of Economics and Business Research, is specifically targeting consumers in the UK. They found that over 22.8 billion pounds a year are spent online during public transportation, right? So while they're in a train going from home to the office, for example, they are shopping by the tune of 22.8 billion pounds. There's another research, Global Web Index, that tells us that 54% of social media users use social media to research products, right? So I'm going to, I don't know, buy um, I'm struggling to think about, oh, let's say buy a couch, right? I want to buy me a couch. My couch is broken and it's old, so I need to buy a new couch instead of what I want and do it. I will take the time in social media to look for couches and how other people are using, so on and so forth. And it's very interesting because while on one hand we consumers have become hyper connected, right? And we're taking advantage of this behavior, this consumer behavior, to be more informed and demand more. Well, the companies that are producing those items have indeed reacted to it by developing an amazingly strong digital presence. So, just a few more statistics here. Just in 2019, mobile device accounted for 50 over 0.44% of the total internet traffic and 77% of the total digital minutes in the US, right? It's just a few years ago. And so, not only that, mobile device is not just this little tiny device, but is also increased a whole slew of items that we all carry with us, mobile device, tablets, and wearables, right? So we are really immersed in this new platform with the new objects that push us to be a different person than we were perhaps only 10 years ago. So uh, I'm a consumer. I have access to information. I have real demands, and I have high expectations, right? And but I am part of a tightly aligned um, ecosystem that influences us through technology, and in our case we can influence that. So I just stop here to say, do you remember the days when you had to see if a certain company had business hours, and if we wanted to reach out to them to ask for something by phone or whatever, we need to adhere to their business hours, right? Before I could actually acquire product. And it's very interesting because while there's this influence of technology on our behavior as consumer, right? The as I mentioned, the companies are using that as a powerful tool to influence us. And just to finalize this discussion here, it is also important to understand that chatbots, right, are becoming increasingly integrated into our everyday lives. And I believe that the research says that 40% of all millennials interact with chatbot daily with no issues. And artificial intelligence powered chatbots enable those companies to really create messaging, right, and influence a certain behavior. So very kind of scary, right? Because as more and more companies will use artificial intelligence, there's also those consumer communications are being tracked, and there is further and further ability to manipulate my behavior. How do we fare with all this, right? Let's just pause to think about this problem, this area in a different angle. It is believed that uh, a group of people, a community, a nation is regarded as a happy access to happiness due to their ability to have the technology available to them, right? And this technology, big technology word, right? Capital T. We're talking about not only the devices that are electronic, but the ability to communicate, to transport, to access health, to access to air travel. I don't know everything, but the other part of this happiness quotient, if you will, as connected as we are, there is an expectation of sorts, largely driven to increase our appetite to consume, to use influencers, right? So we are a social animal, and we look for that role model to tell us, well, this is, I have access, I have the means, I'm immersed in this context. And now there's this rise of influencers that will help mold me to a certain behavior. So interesting. We consumers trust influencers. So when that person, that influencer, promotes a product, we followers listen. And it's very interesting because there's yet another research that says that half of all respondents to a survey say they have purchased a product after seeing it used by a social media influencer. And this is a 2023 Trust in Influencer Marketing report by Isaiah. And as you can see, the impact of that individual that pose and work as an influencer online is quite real. There's an example here, right? There is a TikTok hashtag, hashtag TikTok made me buy it. This hashtag has had over 8 billion views. And it is amazing to say that because it is full of consumers motivated to buy a product because they saw their favorite TikTok influencer endorse a must have makeup or kitchen gadget. So there's an example. A fellow Portuguese and English speaking fashion beauty blogger. Her name is Camila Coelho. She is considered one of the top social media influencers, and she has 8.8 million followers, and she's known for her makeup. So her blog is called Makeup by Camilla. It's she has a YouTube channel, she has a blog, and she has earned um, over 3 million subscribers on YouTube, over 8 million followers on Instagram, and she works with very prominent fashion houses such as Dior, Tory Burch, etc. Right? It's a beautiful woman, and she says that. And what happens to us on the other side of the mobile device? Well, we're inundated with superseding fads, right? So they're raging fads from makeup to hair, body type, etc. And those influencers are very good at causing what we call copycat behavior. So think about it. There is a lot of people imitating one another and assuming identical posture, which leads Yes, Joanna told us that, which leads us to a weakening of ideals, of ethics, um, and and a weakening of the family as a unit in the individual per se, right? So this is the actual problem. This is what Joanna talked to us at the very, very initial bold statement, the dehumanizing equality that consumerism promotes. And I have to say, must be exhausting to stay super relevant as an influencer or as a follower. And yes, there's a third group out there, which is that increasing group of people who present themselves as I have to be an original. I'm not an influencer. I'm not a follower. I'm an original. And we could call them the counterculture, right? They're here to shock us or try to shock us with exoticism, and they everything everybody else is doing, they scorn. They just talk back at us, and yet we have to say this is a cycle to each one of those, right? And once the novelty is actually wearing off, they're discarded. And we look at it and I say, my goodness, what else is problematic with our behaviors today? Well, Joanna brings us, and I hate to say it, right? But she tells us that those postures, influencer, follower, or the counterculture, the originals, right? They're actually hiding a, a collective complex, and that collective complex destroy life by installing a climate of indifference, if not instability in people, right? So she says to us, all of us, brothers and sisters in humanity, we must find our own identity ourselves. And we just are immersed in model behaviors. And what I mean by that, the behaviors that are modeled by all types of people that have a contempt for our own individual identity, right? So think about it. Even yet, another issue here is uh, as we are suffocated by no longer have a sense of humanity, but big but, right? But we are afraid of confronting ourselves, right? The truth about ourselves. Who are we after all? We then move on. This is the fourth type of behavior, right? We move on, we seek refuge in any form or place that allow us a sense of belonging. And those can be social activism, political parties, social clubs, sports club, and so on and so forth. So, what Joanna brings to us from a social behavior is that it's okay. It's okay to become an influencer, a follower, an original, or an activist, or part of community. The problem that she says is that as we are part of whatever organization, we're still incredibly lonely. And we see enemies everywhere. as part of a tightly um, branded, a tightly controlled, if you will, a group, we find enemies to anyone that does not subscribe to our thoughts, attitudes, or jersey, right? And we start to trying to avoid them. We ghost them. We unsubscribe. We unfriend. We block them from our lives. And yes, it's easy enough to, in trying to belong, to move away those that don't necessarily think or behave like us today. And the conclusion here is that we're all hiding behind a facade of someone who's tolerant, welcoming, supportive, smiling, everything is peachy, but in the end, it's really not. Let's, if you don't mind, I want to continue our conversation here because, as you can see here, right, the cruelest enemies, however, are not those that don't subscribe to how I feel, think, behave, dress. The cruelest enemies lie within ourselves. And it is frighteningly write this sentence, right? Because in an attempt to be accepted, we we give our lives, our energy, our strength to meet a social convention which is really driven by a sense of pride and selfishness. Oh, we can speak another hour about it, but that in just a moment, just say the fact that we are living into this illusion, and I here put my hand as if it was a mirror, right? An illusion, which is fueled by an image that I'm projecting to be able to be accepted in that very, very important position. And also, we need to do this because we always want to be best. And we want to do this out of our self centered type of personality. Yes. But remember, the book is Jesus in Our Day. So can we bring Jesus now and perhaps discuss how would he deal with this environment we live? What was his life and how perhaps did social conventions that were an obstacle to him were dealt with or confronted? Well, Jesus knew how to identify, and this is so simple and so amazing to think about it. He knew how to look at you or me, the individual, as an individual. And no one has ever been able to do that since Jesus. He listened to anyone who approached him, even though many of those people tried and, of course, failed to hide their own motive. I'm talking about those you see biblical references to the hypocrites and deceivers. They were right there in Jesus' knowing eyes. He could see right behind their intentions and who they really were. His moral position is really overwhelming. And he confronted each one of those individuals that approached him with love or vehemence, depending on the circumstances, but with a benevolent heart regardless. And the best lesson that Jesus brought us is that in the moment of that confrontation with the individual, he taught each one to go on within themselves and scrutinize him or herself in order to be able to remove the cause of pain, whatever was unfolding there. So he would do this, and immediately afterwards, he would encourage them to grow personally by dismantling all of those mental and social dynamics that were conspiring at the time, right, of Jesus. And it's very interesting because once we look at this alert that Jesus gave to each one that sought his help, go grow inwardly, dismantle all of those mental and social constructs that we are inserted on, because they are there to just diminish, dilapidate, dilute our cultural and emotional being that is really hurting everybody at the same time. So, from Jesus' perspective, Jesus saw, Jesus listened, he taught about self discovery, he encouraged everyone to break down the mental and social conspiracy that each one of us or them were immersed in. And I just have to say, how about this amazingly current message to all of us? Let's be real. And I'm approaching the end of our conversation today by talking a little bit about confronting the truth. Matthew chapter 26, verse 75, references Peter when he said, we learned that Peter's denial, remember, he denied Jesus 3 times. Peter's denial was a powerful lesson, for as soon as he came to his senses, he wept bitterly. And it's very important. This just one verse, right? This very a critically important message that Joanna brings to us through the words by Matthew, right? That the explosion of tears in Peter when he saw that, yes, Jesus, you were right. All my love was for you was not enough. And I find myself denying you 3 times. And so he cries, and that was very cathartic for him. And through those tears, Peter, was able to free himself from all the hurt and pain deriving from the remorse that could have, Joanna tells us, could have rendered him neurotic, like Judas, right? Who eventually took his own life. But instead, he freed himself, and he rose from his own downfall and defeated his own enemies. In the case of Peter, those enemies were fear and cowardice. And instead, he was able to spend his life, the rest of it, really doing everything to make amends with himself, with Jesus. And he did that by practicing good. And Jesus accepted his real offering of love, and of course utilized him in his ministry, um, talking about Christianity. So if we think about it, we see that Jesus, our master, knew Peter, and because he knew Peter, he predicted his weaknesses, right? His defection, his denial. And because he could see that, he pointed out, Peter, those are your inner enemies. Those are the enemies that you must struggle this lifetime. And I end our time together just asking, what are our enemies? Is it fear? Is it cowardice? Is it loneliness? What is it? Is it pride? Is it selfishness? Well, Joanna de Angelis concludes the book telling us the following: do not be afraid to confront your shadows, those enemies stirring within you. Be strong and focus on Jesus, the proper therapist. Let your emotion reach him, Jesus. So, as we listen to those final words in this book, we understand that we should not let all the adversaries that we all have, our enemies, that we carry unconsciously or consciously with us, right? She says, go ahead, familiarize yourself with them, identify them, and one by one, start to unburden them like Peter did, right? And just become lighter. Let's, she says, recover our humanity. She welcomes us to be ourselves. And she finalizes, concluding this book this chapter in this book by telling us that yes, we can mix in with everyone in our social group or groups and still preserve ourselves by not giving in to the impositions of all that neurotic behavior that is produced by consumerism. So we part here today. And I just would like to invite all of us to be open to renewal, to be open to diversity, to be open to our own self identity, and unburden all of the things, all of the resistance that we bring within us. Because when we do that, we become optimistic and we become healthy and we become part of really wholesome relationships. So I hope our weekly meetings have inspired you to begin each day with love and courage. And I'll see you next time when we talk about the next book by Joanna de Angelis in her psychological series, The Integral Being. Thank you so very much for your time today.